Now our job when those bombers went in was to go in ahead of the bombers and strafe the anti-aircraft guns. You've seen pictures of streams of anti-aircraft fire coming up. Flying down into that is a real dangerous business. But you see there's only one pilot in a fighter plane. So if you're going to lose an airplane, it's best to lose a fighter with one man in it than a bomber with 10 men. So we went down to shut down the anti-aircraft guns, to dive bomb and strafe them. The next picture is the briefing for that mission. Now that's a briefing for the that bombing at St. Lo. I'm going to talk about dead men. They were not all killed on the one mission, however. The guy there with the paper right in front of him was the squadron commander of one of the other squadrons. He was killed. Next to him, looking at his watch with the cap on, is my squadron commander, Major Bruce Parcell, who was killed. Next to him is me. I wasn't killed. But next to me is Jim Pelletier, who was killed. Next to him is Kelly, who was killed. The guy looking straight forward, right behind Major Parcell, that's Mike O'Rourke. He survived. The guy, the hat next to him is Ben Savage, my best buddy, who was killed. Right behind him with his face down and it looks like a white spot on his face, that's Jim Koontz. He was killed. Of the recognizable people in that picture, 2 survived. This is what people don't understand about the loss of life in World War II. Most folks know about the Marines on Iwo Jima, and that was a slaughter. But the highest loss rate, that is the number killed relative to the numbers involved, were the submarine crews. Because after all, if you sink one of those, you got 100% of them. The second highest loss rate, though, were the airmen. The 8th Air Force alone, just the 8th Air Force flying out of England in less than 3 years, had 47,000 airmen killed. That is more airmen in the 8th Air Force alone than there were Marines in the entire service. The 100th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force had 1,000 men killed on 1 2-hour raid. Twice. Now, our fighter squadron's nowhere near the size of a bomb group, but we had 24 pilots in the squadron, 18 were killed. Now, when my buddy Savage, the guy with the hat behind, all you can see is his hat, Ben Savage, we were strafing a truck convoy, an anti-aircraft fire hit his plane and it crashed and killed him. After we and the Germans left the area, the French people around there got his body out of the wreckage, wrapped him in an American flag and buried him. 2 days later, the front lines had moved past there, so our flight surgeon, Doc Milligan, took a couple of guys in a Jeep and went down and dug him up and took him to the American cemetery, which you see in the next picture. That is the Normandy American Cemetery. I know you've seen pictures. If you haven't seen the cemetery itself, you've seen pictures, beautifully landscaped with marble crosses and stars of David for the Jewish folks with their names engraved in it. Those are wooden. They just nail the dog tags on there to identify who's in the grave. The one in the lower left corner, you can clearly see the dog tag. That's my buddy Ben Savage. I took that picture 40 days after D-Day. There were 6,400 graves in there. 90 days later, there were 9,800. And that's just the American cemetery at Normandy. There's another one in Brittany, one in Alsace-Lorraine, one in Belgium. Then the Canadians and English have separate ones in here, as do the Germans. Right behind that tree line in the background, on the other side of that is Omaha Beach, where our soldiers landed on D-Day morning. Kind of put things in perspective. Think about this. In one day, June 6, 1944, over 5,000 Americans were killed on that beach alone. Now you compare that to 4,000 killed in Iraq in 4 years, and you have an idea of what happened here. Freedom is a very expensive proposition, both in treasure and blood, and you all are worth every bit of that. Okay, the next picture is an illustration of the amount of abuse that a P-47 could take and still bring you home. That isn't me nor my airplane, it is one of our squadron planes. He got hit with a 40mm shell that hit the elevator in the thing, and blew a hole big enough to stand in, but it flew him back. We had another guy that came back with about a 4-foot piece of telephone pole jammed in the wing. He hit the pole about a foot from the top, and it broke off, and he came back with that splintered chunk in the wing. They had to replace the wing, but it flew him home. My airplane got shot up on 13 different missions. The next picture is an illustration of that. That was the first time I got hit. It's only a 20 millimeter that hit the elevator, but it was a difficult hit. That big piece of metal you see bent down there acted as a giant trim tab, and that airplane kept trying to climb. And I had to fly it with my shoulders braced against the seat, both hands jammed against the stick, and some of the time my foot on it to hold the nose down. And 45 minutes of flying like that was really wearisome, but it got me back. The worst I got hit, I had an 88 millimeter anti-aircraft shell blow up under the wing. Now an 88 millimeter shell is about as long as that table and that big around. When that thing blew up, it rolled the plane, and I got it righted just as the next one hit the engine cowling, and it blew a cylinder and 2 cylinder heads off the engine, and that thing kept running for 40 minutes, long enough to get me behind the American lines, so when I crashed, I didn't get captured. Now, it sounded like an oil drum full of bricks and was throwing oil all over the place, but it ran good enough to keep an 8-ton fighter in the air. We got back to the little town of Chalon-sur-Marne, a grass airfield east of Paris where we intended to land and refuel. I put the landing gear handle down, the right wheel dropped down and locked. I couldn't get it back up because there was no hydraulics left, which meant I couldn't use the flaps to land, and there was no left landing gear at all. I brought that thing into that grass airfield 180 miles an hour and landed on one wheel. The wingtip dropped down, dug into the dirt, and spun it like that, and I never got a scratch. The P-47 is the best airplane ever built. The next picture is an illustration of the size of the thing. In that picture, I'm seated. Get this thing turned around. Right there, at the joint of the wing and the fuselage. Look at the size of the nose out in front of you. When you came in to land, now you see pictures of fighter planes coming in to land. You saw it in this little preview you had here. They come in low and they're peeling up like that. They're not hot dogging. There are 2 reasons for that. One is that a fighter plane at low altitude and low speed is very vulnerable. So we wanted to come in fast and then kill your speed and get on the ground quick. Try this in your plane. You come in and cut your throttle and pull it into a tight climbing turn, and you'll see that airspeed drop quick. That's what we would do, and that's what they're doing. So we would come in real low. Come on, airplane, don't fight me. We would come in real low, cut the throttle, pull it up like that, and immediately put your landing and flap handles down. So about out here, your landing gear is down. Over here, you're landing out of a turn, and you're coming down in a turn like that. You're looking out the side of the airplane, and you can see the runway all the way down till just before you reach the ground. You kicked it straight and let it land, and that worked just fine every time. Now the next picture is an illustration of what it took to keep one going in World War II. A 4-man crew assigned to each airplane. The guy with the cap on is me. I'm the pilot. The other 3 fellows don't fly. The one in the middle, Francis Jones, Sergeant Francis Jones, he was my crew chief. His mechanic was between him and me. It was John Icavetta, Sergeant John Icavetta. The other guy on the far left, that's Corporal Stan Stone, the armorer. He took care of the guns, bombs, and ammunition. I've got to divert and talk about Stone for just a minute.